Hello everybody and welcome on Breaking News. Thanks for joining us. My name is Daru, and today we have the chance to discuss about a subject that is affecting everybody in the world, the culture. The most accurate definition that I've come across is a definition from the American anthropologist Edward T. Hall, who stated that culture is a common, deep, unstated experience which members of a given culture share, which they transmit without knowing, and which forms the backdrop against which all other events are judged. So, it's quite comprehensive that culture is formed about two parts, the invisible part and the visible part, also developed by the American anthropologist Edward T. Hall through the cultural aspect developed in the 1970s. So the visible part will be the way we're communicating with others, our cultural codes. However, the invisible parts will be our beliefs, traditions, which remain underwater but must not be neglected. So we are pleased today to interview four students, four Skema Business School students across the globe, which are gonna share their experience with us. I will stop talking and leave my place to Ana Julia Neves in the campus of Belo Horizonte in Brazil. Thank you.
Hello Sarah and hello everybody, my name is Anna, I'm 20 years old and I live in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. Even though I'm Brazilian, I spent most of my life living overseas. I was born in the United States of America and I also lived in Belgium. I lived there until the age of 13, so I spent most of my childhood there. When I returned to Brazil, I experienced many stuff regarding a language barrier because despite coming from a Brazilian family and speaking fluent Portuguese, many words and expressions were new to me. So I experienced many stuff regarding misunderstanding and miscommunication, which are common aspects when we're talking about language barriers. So what helped me the most during this time was that I finally got totally immersed in the language than when I was living abroad, because even though I took Portuguese classes at school, I started learning more about the country, about traditions, about culture, about customs. I started actually to learn a lot more about the country itself. And of course, new words and new expressions were being added to my vocabulary. So I started to improve my Portuguese. And I think learning more about the culture is what helped me the most during this time, what helped me the most regarding language barrier. And today, even though I still sometimes make some mistakes in Portuguese, I consider myself a lot better speaking Portuguese and also in knowledge of Brazilian culture than I was when I first arrived in Brazil. So yeah, and also when I lived abroad, I learned many different languages. I learned English, I learned French, and I got totally immersed in the culture, especially in Belgium, where I spent most of my childhood. So I really got to learn a lot more about the French language and also about the country, thanks to my culture immersion. So this was it. Thank you very much, Sarah. See you soon.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for interviewing me about my experience living abroad. I chose to live in another country, far from my lifestyle, far from my family, by coming to the Skema Business School campus in Raleigh in USA. And I currently there. I knew that studying away from my comfort zone was going to be complicated from the feedback I got from my friends. There are different stages to cultural shock, and the first step is the honeymoon. With excitement and joy, I entered this phase because I arrived in New York and I was starting my new life as an American guy because I knew I was here for 1 year. As Mr. Deep says, this is what you have been looking for, this is what you are planning for, and you are so happy. In Raleigh, where the school is located, I was happy to be able to meet new people, to discover my new home. But after this phase of acceptance, I really fell into the second phase of the culture shock. I can say that I follow the basic plan that Daniel did describe it. My habits were not the same anymore. For example, when I met Americans people at a party, I couldn't be the person I am in France because of the language barrier. I'm used to being a person that people notice at parties because I love with everyone and socialize very quickly with people. And here it's not the same, and so it's extremely frustrating at first. Things that I like in my home country, like getting in my car and going to place where I don't know, become impossible here, and I feel like a prisoner sometimes. But everyone has a different level of resilience, so I'm not depressed. I'm trying to adapt myself by doing what I love to do in my everyday life, make trips in the USA, and learning about the new culture here. Thank you, Sarah.
Hello Sarah, my name is Siqi and I came from China. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit non-verbal communication. So a little accident happened to me when I traveled in UK, because when I was taking a picture with my friends, we use this gesture in public, and everyone passing by just starting looking at us in a weird manner. So this gesture is very common photograph gesture in China and means victory. But afterwards, we learned that it's quite offensive in UK. Scholars estimate 80 to 70% of communication is carried out through non-verbal communication, which means non-verbal symbols is very important in communication, even means more and carries more information in verbal communication. So therefore, to have effective and clear, not misunderstanding communication, it is fundamental to understand what's the meaning of the non-verbal gestures. Non-verbal communication is influenced by cultural backgrounds, social, economic backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and educational backgrounds, and so on. And they could express in many different ways, like gestures, facial expressions, and other body movements. Therefore, it is very common if some symbol means different, means one thing in a country, but means totally different in another country, because this non-verbal symbols is a product of the cultural diversity. So my suggestion is, when you go to abroad or before you interact with someone who have different social or cultural background with you, it is very useful for you to do a little bit research and just understand what the non-verbal signal very common and usual for me perhaps means totally different in his or her culture. Thank you.
Coming to you from the city of Seattle in Washington State, I am Zara McGrath, here with a personal testimony on cultural awareness between the United States and France during this global pandemic. First off, don't be fooled. I have personal experience with both cultures and their reaction to COVID-19, since I am half French, half American, but also I've lived in both countries during the pandemic. To first understand the difference in cultures between these two countries, let's first get some information about Hofstede's cultural dimensions. The Hofstede model of national culture consists of 6 dimensions. The cultural dimensions represent independent preferences for one state of affairs over another that distinguish the countries from each other. The 6 dimensions are power distance index, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. In this new segment, I'll touch base on the difference in both cultures through long-term orientation versus short-term orientation, and individualism versus collectivism. Experiencing lockdown in a country like France that scores high in long-term orientation dimension, I experienced a society that was pragmatic, believing in the world pandemic, and allowing the society the tools to adapt to the needed changes in order to achieve results when it comes to controlling the spread, saving and investing in French companies and businesses in the long run. On the other hand, in the United States, that is almost the complete opposite of what happened until recently when the Biden administration took office. The United States scores relatively low as a country and as a culture for long-term orientation. Since the United States is naturally a culture of people that think of short-term goals and performance, creating a long-term plan/solution to combat the epidemic and all the downfalls that came along with it was not introduced. I experienced both cultures during the pandemic and the difference in style of government intervention through aid and lockdown. In the United States culture, the pandemic has had constant speculation and no sense of planning on what to do to combat the virus and go back to normal. While in France, on the other hand, the French government and society are structured around a long-term goal, allowing the community as a whole to thrive for a better future. The French government created a long-term goal momentum by giving financial aid to the French community in order for it to survive throughout the pandemic and the ability to continue until they are able to thrive after the pandemic is over. However, in the United States, the government did not supply financial aid for its society. Many businesses and families are in financial distress due to the shutdown and no help from the government, which ultimately will not help the economy in the long run. The next cultural difference between France and the United States is collectivism versus individualism culture present in their society. This culture difference is most prevalent with the lockdown situation in both countries. The French are a very collective society in general compared to the United States. When it came to the lockdown and the well-being of a whole society, the French government and the collective society sacrificed the freedom and individuality of its citizens through a harsh lockdown, not once, not twice, but 3 times now. This sacrifice was done for the collective future of all on French territory. While in the United States, society is based on individualism and survival of the fittest due to the society's mentality and deregulation. In the United States, there was never a national lockdown of any sort of regulation on certain things in order to control the spread of the virus. I was shocked after coming back from Europe that after 10 months of this global pandemic, there was no national mask mandate in the United States. This is a prime example of a difference in culture identities. The French society is a more collective society, while the United States was founded on individualism. I am thankful for both cultures and both experiences that are quite different from each other. If I had to pick between both cultures, I'm not sure I could pick or make a decision on which one I would take and which one I would forget about. I've learned so much from both cultures, even though they are completely opposite. I'm thankful to have both cultures and be aware that these different societies have shaped me to be the person I am. Reporting to you live from Seattle, Washington, I'm Zara McGrath, your International Cultural Dimension expert. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you for sharing your experiences, which were obviously very interesting. These testimonies remind me one of my experience in Thailand when I was 15 years old, where I was confronted to a culture very different from mine and where I didn't know how important the Buddhist religion were in their eyes. So much that I show up in a temple with my knees and my shoulders uncovered. Indeed, I had made the mistake of having informed myself about the culture, the history, and the religion of this country. In any case, this experience told me something, that culture is shared and appreciated. In conclusion of all these beautiful testimonies, it is essential to retain only the positive because they make us grow on a professional and personal point of view and build our world. Thank you so much!